Welcome those who've joined us. I'll do one little more reminder. If you have just joined, please shut you off your video and mute your side. We want to make sure that the winemakers get all the chances they have to be able to talk about Tidal Bay and about their products. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to put that in the message board, and I'll try to get to as many as I possibly can within the next hour. Again, we'd like to welcome you to the second in a 5-part series of Tidal Bay virtual tastings with the winemakers of Nova Scotia, and we've got three great ones. Well, I suppose four great ones tonight. My name is Peter Rockwell. I'm the Senior Category Manager at the NSLC and a long time Nova Scotia wine fan, so I'm really pleased that I was asked to be the moderator and host for today's get-together. And again, make sure if you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the message board, and I'll be passing those along. Let's get started with introductions. So certainly let's start with Simon Rayfuse, winemaker at Blomidon Estate Vineyards. We're also joined by Amber McGuinness and John Elkenbloom from Church Street Vineyards, which the NSLC is very happy that they're joining us on the shelf this year. That's great news. It's been great working with both of you over the last little while to make everything work for us. And last but definitely not least, Gina Haverstock, winemaker representing Gaspereau Vineyards tonight, but also, of course, the winemaker with Yost Vineyards and Mercator Vineyards. Yeah, I almost got. Oh, took me a second there. Mercator. So many vineyards, Gina. So many vineyards. Before we get started in the tastings, I suggest if you've picked up a bottle or two or three, now's the time to start getting those corks popped or caps unscrewed and wine into the glass, because we're going to be starting in a few minutes. For those certainly that know Tidal Bay, know that it's Nova Scotia's signature wine. It's produced using a set of standards that in many ways mirror the appellation systems in some European countries, but unlike Europe, where it tends to be a region, Nova Scotia is the region itself. Not to insult the winemakers here, but arguably one of the key components to those standards are the fact that it has to be made with 100% Nova Scotia wine, or grapes, excuse me, 100% Nova Scotia grapes, and there is a set of specific grapes that they can use. So that's certainly something we can talk to them about as the time goes on. So without further ado, Simon, let's learn everything we can about yourself, about Blomidon, and about the 2020 Tidal Bay from Blomidon Estate.
Yeah, super. Thanks very much, Peter. So welcome everybody who's joining us. Should be fun, and it's great to put together these sort of evening events where we can go through a lot of the Tidal Bays and share a little bit about our appellation with you. So Blomidon Estate Winery, we're located just outside of Canning. We're for the most part an estate winery. We have vineyards on 3 sites. We do buy in a little bit from some not neighboring, but local growers. But for the most part, we do all estate. We've been with Tidal Bay right from the start. And actually our Tidal Bay wines have stayed relatively similar. We've always used the same blend of Lacadie Blanc. I'm sorry, I'm seeing the messages pop up. Lacadie Blanc, Céval Blanc, and Muiric Muscat. Percentages change a little bit year by year, but that's kind of what we go with. And we sort of crafted sort of a style that we really like and enjoy. So 2020, I'm sure we may talk about this a little bit, but was, obviously for lots of reasons, really terrible year. But from a grape growing perspective, it was actually pretty good vintage, all in all. Yields were down a little bit, just with some dryness. We would have perhaps liked to see a little bit more crop coming in. But at the same time, what we got was really quite ripe, even exceptionally so for Nova Scotia. And with some of the wines that go into things like Tidal Bay, we were looking at levels of ripeness and sort of sugar development and so on and so forth that we hadn't really seen before, at least certainly not in a long time. As a result, I find personally, in the ones that I've tasted, that the Tidal Bays are a little bit different, not in a bad way, but they're a little bit different this year. They tend to be a little bit more aromatically complex, a little bit rounder. Maybe the acidity plays a slightly lesser role. And we found that in our blending. So Lila asked in the message there, and I can tell you because I looked it up, but I'm gonna have to read off my phone. I'm not checking Twitter or whatever. So our 2020, for those of you who like the numbers, Tidal Bay is 11% alcohol. There's 12.5 grams of sugar, residual sugar, which is all natural because we stopped the fermentation of the Céval. The TA is 9.7, which is actually a little bit on the low side for us. We're typically up a little over 10. And the pH is 3.1, we'll say, which again is shockingly actually a little bit high for us. We typically hover around that 3 mark. So those are all kind of indicators of a slightly riper vintage. Again, I can't exactly remember the percentages off the top of my head. I know that there's a little bit more muscat in this particular wine than we typically have. It's about 3.5%, where we're typically around 2. What we do with the New York Muscat in blending is we really add like 0.5% by 0.5% or whatever that amount is until absolutely the very first inkling of it. And that's when we stop, because we don't want muscat to play a leading role in our wine, but it does add some complexity and brings a floral note to the relatively citrusy tree fruit Lacadis and Cévals. There's a question there. Yes, it is only New York Muscat. There's no Osceola. So yeah, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the blend off. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you. But,
we had planned on a test later on, though. There was going to be a test after, though. Sorry.
I would fail. Anyway, so yeah, this year for us, like I was saying, a little bit riper. There was it wasn't a hurricane by the time it got to us, but there was the threat of a hurricane, and which ended up being a tropical storm. I can't remember its name, but it rolled through sometime in the 20s of September. What was it? Gina might remember. 25th. Dawn, I don't know. Anyway, somewhere around there.
Late September.
Yeah, 24th, 25th, 6th, something like that. Anyway, for us, the big decision was, do we pick before or wait it out? And ultimately, sort of the sugar and ripeness levels were there to pick before, but we didn't feel that the flavors had quite gotten to the point that it was ready to go. So, we kind of crossed our fingers and just waited it out. And in the end, I think that was the right call for us. We probably picked maybe the following week and ended up with what was like sort of a riper, more developed style of Tidal Bay, but one without any greenness or whatever that we're quite pleased with. So in the glass on our 2020, the thing that really kind of hits you first is limes. And our Tidal Bay is always very citrusy, very lime driven, but this is like lime. It's kind of crazy. When we first bottled it, it was even more so. I was like, holy cow, like this is like, it's unbelievable. We didn't know how it happened, but I really like it. Like, I'm a big fan of citrus fruit in Tidal Bays. I'm a big fan of liminess. I like that style. We pick to encourage it. So very pleased with that. So dominant lime off the first bit. Next up, I think we're really into some of that sort of chalky minerality, and it's like a chalk note, like that the Céval brings. We try to pick our Céval relatively early to keep that. So lime, chalk, and then we're into that sort of Lacady tree fruits, apples, apple pear, and so on and so forth. The muscat just kind of lifts the finish with a little bit of florality. And then the palate, maybe a little softer than we typically see from Blomidon, but again, really good balance between the residual sugar and the acidity. It drinks dry, like, the numbers don't really mean much. It's more of the perceived perception of how it drinks. It drinks dry. Great summer sort of patio sipper.
Craig Penny's asking if in the liminess, kind of a lime cordial, maybe.
More like lime, almost like zest. It's very fresh, like very fresh, and like citrus. you know when people make cocktails and they do the little bend the citrus peel kind of thing, and you get that squirt of kind of a mist. It's almost like lime that, but I really like it. But yeah.
Of course you do. Yes. Yes.
Best one we've ever made.
Thank you so much. So let's move over to Amber and John, and I guess same question. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, about the winery, and certainly all the exciting elements of your 2020 Tidal Bay.
Thanks. Well, as you know, we're new to this, and we decided, hey, let's try to open last year, and then COVID said, no, I don't think so. So we finally opened up in February of this year, and this is actually our second time. And it's got a whole new look and everything. And I'm basically the taster. Not gonna lie, I let them know, no, I don't like this. Tastes like this. You have to add something. It's really Patrick and John that do all of the formalized stuff. When you're mentioning the pH, it's like, I don't know what that is. But I can tell you what kind of grape it is, because I had to, for years, put it on my phone to decide. I can tell you that everything in Tidal Bay, it comes from our estate. We are in Fort Williams, and we had a really good year last year. We might have had to burn some bales of hay every once in a while, twice actually, drive around the gator, but we really did have a great year. So our wine consists of 50% Lacady, 25% Geisenheim, which I really like the Geisenheim, and 25% Céval. So the whole thing together is like a fruity kind of explosion in your mouth, because it's a full malt feel, and it's balanced, and it smells really good. So I agree. It's perfect for being on the patio. Although, if anyone has ever seen our wines, we don't really tell you what to eat or drink or pair it with. Mind you, seafood is always the option. Someone had mentioned fiddleheads. Float your boat, but basically have it with whatever you want. Just as long as you enjoy it. Enjoy it with friends. Enjoy it by yourself after a long day work. Yeah. So, do you have anything to add?
10% alcohol.
10% alcohol. Yeah. So you can have quite a few. I wish it was diet, but it's not. But you know, it is COVID after all. Yeah. So, you know, we had an amazing growing year, and your wine is only as good as the grapes that the land produces, and we're really, really lucky because John is the farmer in the family. I kill everything and John grows everything. So we've been very, very lucky to be here.
It was the first day we sold it today in the winery, and it flew off the shelf. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It was beautiful.
It's great. Yeah.
Excellent.
2 couples drove from Shelburne for 3 bottles of Tidal Bay today. Tidal Bay 2020. And that was nice.
So we're excited just to be a part of all of this and all of you, and yeah, it's pretty spectacular. So,
and we love the appellation. We love that someone else tells us if it's a yes or no. That's that really feels nice. That we're judged by our peers for this wine, and it was. I always. I started this journey in Lacady, and that was front and foremost that I wanted a Tidal Bay more than anything else. And thanks to everyone that helped us get here.
And Patrick. Patrick is an amazing winemaker. We've been very, very lucky. We have a lot of laughs when we're putting the wines together. So yeah, it's great.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good point. It's worth reminding everyone that the Tidal Bay wines go through a blind independent tasting panel that, you know, for the standards of style and those elements, that all are put through that process, which is again very affirming that that you're on the right track with what you're producing. Thanks so much. And so, Gina, let's hear from about Gaspereau, and again maybe a little bit about Gaspereau and yourself and the Tidal Bay for 2020.
Great, thanks everyone. Yeah, and I'm excited to be a part of this for Gaspereau. I don't know if you've noticed, with the warmer weather, I'm at the winery. With the warmer weather, there's a couple mosquitoes that got in. So if you see me, swooshing, it's because there are mosquitoes in here. I'll take them if the warm weather comes. That's fine. I'm happy to speak about our Gaspereau 2020 Tidal Bay. Tidal Bay is always like John and Amber said, always a fun wine to blend. I love blending as a winemaker. You get to take all these different components from the harvest and really try to fulfill what Tidal Bay is as an overall style, but also what your own winery style is. So it's always fun. So here is our 2020. Oh, let's see if we can get it. Tidal Bay. Like Simon, we were, Gaspereau Vineyards was a part of Tidal Bay right from the beginning. We were involved since the 2010 vintage when we had a soft launch of 6 wineries. And the blend that we prepared then was Vidal, Céval, and Muscat. And those 3 grape varieties have followed right through and continue today. But we've added some others and taken away some. But the Céval, Vidal, and New York Muscat have stayed common. Mind you, the percentages, have changed. Yeah, I find, I guess, opposite to what Simon said about his Tidal Bay, the Gaspereau Tidal Bay is quite, runs on the aromatic side. We really go for the sort of the fruit forward and the, floral nose. And I think a lot of people contribute that solely to the New York Muscat in general. But, when we have a nice year like the 2020 harvest was, the Vidal is, it's brimming with apricot and some really great tropical notes as well. So I like the combo. We also have the Céval as a component, and I feel like I'm copying you, Simon, here, but like Simon and Blomidon, we pick our Céval a little early, so we do like to maintain that citrus minerality note and get it before it changes into one of the other profiles. So yeah, that's kind of how it goes. With our Tidal Bay this year, we have, I can give you the percentages. I know some people like this, and since we're talking about varietals, we might as well get right into it, pardon me. So it's 39% Vidal and 32% Céval. We've got 12% Muscat, New York Muscat, 14% Riesling, and 3% Chardonnay. I should have said, Gaspereau Vineyards as a winery, we're a boutique winery and we're just 3 kilometers south of Wolfville. So just up and over the hill in a little red barn on the corner of White Rock Road and Greenfield Road. Right on our estate, we grow Vidal, Céval, New York Muscat, and Riesling. We did have Chardonnay on our site, but we've since removed it, and we get our Chardonnay from a grower. We are estate grown, but we also have different growers around that throughout the valley that we get our grapes from. So right in on the tasting. Oh, and the 2020 vintage obviously also shows a rounder, riper vintage. I feel it on the mouthfeel and on the Gaspereau 2020 especially. In the nose, right off the get-go, there's a lot of peachy notes right there. So really peach forward this year. I get some nice floral undertones, and then also, there's still a vein of minerality that runs through that wine, and I find it a really complex and interesting wine this year. Especially, those riper grapes do help provide a couple of extra layers. On the palate, yeah, definitely weightier. The 2019 was quite a cool and lean year for us at Gaspereau, and so this year, I find, that extra weight comes through from the Vidal and arguably from the a little bit of Chardonnay in there, and the New York Muscat actually also carries some nice weight. The Riesling comes through with some nice minerality and some nice bright backbone of acidity too. So great little finish, and of course, great Tidal Bay as always, and all the Tidal Bays are great with seafood and shellfish. So lovely pairing, I think. Cheers.
Oh, thank you. So, Regina, since you have a glass in your hand, Haley Brown was asking, what is the proper way to taste a wine?
Oh, yeah. So if you have a stem, generally speaking, it's handy to hold it by the stem. There are stemless wine glasses out there. But I feel like I'm back in 2000 when I first took started working at a winery at Yost Vineyards way back when, and Hans Christian Yost taught me these little techniques, and I still tell people these techniques today. So hold it by the stem. It keeps your hand away from the top of the glass, so it doesn't interfere with the aromatics of the wine. It doesn't warm up your wine, because if you're grasping it here, of course, that's not going to help. And and if you happen to have any kind of food or grease on your hands, it's going to actually mar up the glass, so you're not going to be able to see a good appearance. So in wine tasting, there's 3 steps: checking out the appearance of the wine, the nose of the wine, and then the taste of the wine. And everyone loves the taste. They always want to get right to the taste. But yeah, basically having a well-lit room with outdoor light and a white background is great to evaluate the color of the wine. I'm obviously doing a quick little rendition here. Really great to swirl your glass around to get your nose right into that glass. Swirling the glass helps to coax a lot of the aromatics out of the glass and the wine into your nose, so you can pick apart all those little nuances and get a full appreciation. And last, on the taste, it's good to swish the wine around your mouth and get it to all different parts of your mouth, because you have taste receptors and tactile receptors all over. So quick and dirty, but that's a quick go.
Excellent. So today's theme is grapes. It's all about the grapes. The standards say that a Tidal Bay can be made with up to, there's a selection of grapes up to 20. And since certainly, obviously, Gina and Simon have been there since the beginning, can you give us some thoughts on why those grapes were particularly chosen, how they're divided in what you have to use and what you can add as a supplement to those? Any thoughts on how the grapes are chosen and why so many?
Well, Simon, do you want to start, or do you want me to?
I'll take the core grapes, and you can talk about the rest of them. So yeah, it's a test. Can you name all 20? No. So the reasoning is, the core grapes, like the fundamental backbone, I think, of Tidal Bay is based on 4 varieties, which are Lacadie Blanc, Céval Blanc, Geisenheim 318, and Vidal Blanc. And the thinking behind that, and well, just those grapes alone or in combination have to make up a minimum of 50% of any blend. So you're automatically looking at a wine that's half those grapes at a bare minimum. I would say probably the majority are way higher than 50%. But anyway, those 4 grapes in particular were selected really because of their suitability in our climate. They ripen well every year, but they're also grapes that provide like an interesting and consistent profile in our climate. These are varieties that can really they're really marked by having been grown in Nova Scotia. If you taste Cévals from somewhere else or Geisenheims from somewhere else, it's a very different profile. They tend to be much riper, much more round and aromatic, whereas there's a real sort of like freshness and cleanness to the profile of those grapes when they're grown here. And that really just speaks to the length and the coolness of our climate. So at its core, it sort of looks like there's a lot of grape varieties, but at the same time, when the wines are based on those four, and now the nuance of the aromas is different, variety to variety, of course, but there's really there's a quite a clear, when you sit down and taste them all together, there's quite a clear thread that sort of pulls all of these along together. So those are why those four were selected. And then once you get beyond your core, your base Tidal Bay, that's where these other varieties sort of step in and can be used in different amounts, which Gina might know more about them, because I tend to use mostly Lacadie and Céval, which are these core varieties. So.
Yeah. We've never used Lacadie. It started that way and never have, but our core varieties from the primary list of grape varieties are Vidal and Céval, as I mentioned. So, but yeah, Simon's exactly right. That's kind of the base, and those primary grape varieties, as I like to call them, from the primary tier of grape varieties, are really great carriers of terroir, carriers of what Nova Scotia tastes like. And that's why they were chosen. And just to flip back for a moment, I do remember when we were all sort of charged with this idea of, we have a new appellation, a white appellation wine coming out of Nova Scotia, and we need to kind of try to figure out exactly what those standards are going to look like and what varieties are going to be allowed. Simon, you were there as well at Peter Gamble's place at the Blomidon Inn. At the
Blomidon Inn. Yeah.
So yeah, it was in 2000, what was it, 2009. We all, after harvest or early in the new year, all the winemakers, or several winemakers, were asked to bring some varietal wines in bottles right from tank, and so we could start kind of hashing this out and trying to figure it out. And these were the varieties that came right to the top, those primary varieties, the four varieties Simon mentioned, right away. And I don't think there was any disputing that, Simon. It kind of rose to the top right away.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot else. It was pretty clear that those four were going to make the basis of this. And then, there was a lot of discussion beyond that from the other varieties, but those four were pretty clear that they were going to be the ones at the heart of Tidal Bay.
Absolutely. And then I'll jump to the easier one first, which is the tertiary variety, the list of varieties that are really aromatic, and you're not allowed to go over 15% of the blend. So those would include things like New York Muscat and any other Muscat aromatic varieties like that. So then in between are the other varieties, and there's quite a large list. I actually have the list here. I'm cheating a little bit, but loosely speaking, we've got Céval, we've got Riesling, Chardonnay. Let me get that clear. We've got Pinot Gris, Chasselas there, Ortega, Siegfried, Osceola Muscat, which is different from New York Muscat and a lot more neutral, I would say. Frontenac Gris, Frontenac Blanc, Cayuga, and Petit Milo at this point. So I can't remember, Simon, if that one got moved or not, but generally speaking, those are the in-between.
Yeah. Interestingly, some of them have moved around. We do meet, we typically meet every year. There's the Winery Association, or Wine Growers Nova Scotia, has a technical committee, which Gina and I both sit on. And we usually meet every year. The last year or two has been a little bit complicated, but we'll discuss, people can bring new varieties to the table, or we've removed varieties. And it's sort of, it's not like it changes a lot, but it is a bit of a work in progress, and or a working document, or whatever you want to call it. But we do go through and taste, and if there's new varieties being planted in Nova Scotia that fit the profile of Tidal Bay and are going to add character to Tidal Bay blends, without detracting from the Tidal Bay program. Then yeah, absolutely, we're going to add things like that, and maybe remove things. There are some that have been removed. Nothing's coming to right off the top of my head, but
yeah. And I think the Shasta was added recently. Am I not? I think I'm right. The last 2 years ago, maybe.
I don't know, but Petit Milo has moved in category, I think. There's a few of them that bounced around.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of the basis of the varieties, and how each winemaker, how many from each tier, if you will, and the percentages, as long as they're within the guidelines, it's to each winemaker's discretion how those get blended together to represent Tidal Bay as a whole, and then each winery in Tidal Bay.
Paul Keating has a question for John and Amber. Is this your first vintage for Tidal Bay, the 2020? Second vintage, so 2019, 2020. And now Craig Pinney's asking, what was Gina's grape blend again?
Do you want the percentages? So
he's testing you.
39% Vidal. I've got it written. I don't remember these things. Simon and I are on the same.
I got mine. I'll tell him later.
Okay. So 39 Vidal, 32% Seyval, 12% Muscat, 14% Riesling, and 3% Chardonnay.
So certainly blending, obviously creating an individual wine with personality that really reflects the winery. Is there a reason why you couldn't produce a Tidal Bay from one varietal? Is there anything in the rules that say you couldn't?
It's supposed to be a blend. I would say that in the soft launch, I believe there was one that had a single varietal, but we've not seen that since that soft launch, when only 6 wineries were participating. So, I think generally we're all leaning toward blending more than one.
I think in the regulations it says it has to be a blend, but that may be it. But yeah, the one that was a single variety was great, and it passed the tasting panel, and it was great. It
represented the terroir quite well.
There you go.
Yeah.
Could you give us? You mentioned sort of the top tier 4 or 5. The history of some of those grapes in Nova Scotia, especially Lackady. Although Gina, you said you don't use Lackady in your Tidal Bay, but it's a grape varietal that many consumers will recognize, whether it is a single varietal on a label or a part of Tidal Bay. Could you give us maybe a little bit of history on Lackady and maybe some of the others, and when they came to prominence in Nova Scotia?
Does anyone else want to answer? I'm sorry, I feel like I'm speaking a lot.
It's open forum.
You would probably be best to answer it.
Okay.
Take this one, Gina. We're good.
So I can't remember exactly the full original name, which was an ID number for Lackady, but it was initially developed in Vineland in Ontario. And they planted it out there, and it was called V53, V for Vineland, 53 for the 1953 when it was developed. And then there's several numbers after it. I'm sure someone will probably post it here. But it was developed there, and what they found in Ontario when they planted it out, it ripened far too quickly. They were harvesting it in early August or something along those lines. And so when some of the pioneers of the Nova Scotia industry were looking for grape varieties that worked really well, that would ripen within our cooler than Ontario climate, they happened upon Lackady, which wasn't called Lackady. It was just that V53 other numbers, and they brought it to Nova Scotia, and they found it thrived here. Not only did it reflect the terroir here, but it ripened within our season. It's really for a grower. John, you can probably attest to this. It's very upright. It doesn't like to flop over a whole lot, which makes it easier to train than some of the other sort of more droopy varieties. And and so it became home here, and I believe in 1995 or 96 is when they officially named it Lackady, but it had been being called Lackady from some of the early wineries as early as 82. So it didn't officially get its name until quite some time later. That's the Lackady story as I know it.
A couple of questions for John and Amber. One is the residual sugar of your Tidal Bay.
Grams.
Oh, could you say again, please?
16 grams.
16 grams. And they'd like to see your label again. They want to make sure they can recognize it. And the question of, yes, it will be sold in SLC stores currently and be going to more starting next week.
Here we are.
Oh, nice.
That's it.
Thanks.
Right. You all talked about the different grapes you chose for your Tidal Bays, and so I'm going to do a little bit of explanation on why, but maybe go in a little bit more detail on Simon, especially when you're talking about, you're obviously choosing this one, choosing that one, to doing the different tastings of the different plots and the different styles of grapes. How do you come to decide that that's going to be the wine that's going to represent Church Street with Tidal Bay, or with Gaspereau, or with Blomidon? How do you decide that those are the combination of grapes you want to represent the winery?
We just basically start blending from here, and what do we like? It's like mad science. You put in a little bit of this, you put in a little bit of that. Is this grape any more ripe than another one? Did this one suffer damage? Did this one have a banger year? It all just boils down to the blending and the tasting, and going back and adding a little bit more, taking some away. But for us, we like to be able to use everything from our vineyard.
And it was very organized this year. It was quick. It was really quick when we stuck our nose in the tanks this year. The grapes were healthy this year. The vineyard was really clean, the tonnage, and the grapes came in like you could dream of for having an Apples Valley harvest.
Yeah, we're really lucky. We're really lucky.
And I suppose it's Marcia Trudeau, I think, may have sort of retooled my question, saying that she really finds your wine beautiful, and is looking for that inspiration. What inspired you to, which I think you've answered, what inspired you to combine those grapes to create it? Gina, any thoughts on the inspiration of the combination of grapes?
So I knew we wanted to use obviously what we had here in our state as well at the time, and we were quite a small production, quite a lot smaller than we are now, and I was quite new on the scene as well, and so Seyval and Vidal, stuck out because we had one sort of mid-season, kind of earlier season variety, and one that was quite late. So, if in a cooler year, the Vidal, which is the later ripening variety, was a little leaner, you could kind of offset with another variety and hanging it longer and earlier ripening, for example. But the reason why, I have to tell you, there's no fun story about the reason why Gaspereau doesn't have any Lacadie in it, other than we share our estate vineyard with our sister winery, Yost Vineyards, and we had already harvested our Lacadie for our Lacadie varietal, which we had at the time, and they needed the rest of the Lacadie up there, so we just didn't put Lacadie in from the beginning, and just loved it and never went back. So it was a practical and not an exciting reason, but I like where it all went.
Yeah, Simon?
Yeah, so I guess, it started basically like what we had available, which was we do have a couple different vineyard sites, but for whites, it's primarily Lacadie and Seyval, alongside a bunch of vinifera stuff like Chardonnay and whatever, which we tend to use up all of in sparkling wines, especially. But anyway, but like when we were sort of talking and doing our first initial blends in those early years, it was like at the time we had a Lacadie Blanc, we had a Seyval Blanc, still wines as they were. And we'd kind of been working those into a style that we liked, like I've always liked that crisper, fresher style, like not to get like overly technical about anything or whatever, but we process all of our white grapes basically like we process our sparkling wines. So almost everything gets whole cluster pressed, and we get very clean, very high acid juice, and we like that. Like that's the style that we like to make at the winery, and so on and so forth. So when we started looking at Tidal Bay and looking at how we were going to put these blends together, that was kind of the starting point. And it was like, all right, well, what kind of wine do we think represents our site? And if any of you, participating here or listening here have been to Blomidon, we're literally right on the water. If it was icy and you toboggan down the vineyards, you would end up in wine space. So it's quite a sandy spot. It's a little bit cooler. It seems hot, but it is a little cooler, and so we tend to have good acid retention and whatever. So anyway, citrus was really kind of the focus, and how we do that, like our first picks any vintage are sparkling wines. So we start sparkling wines, usually our Cuvée Lacadie stuff and our Crémant stuff, and then immediately following those picks, we go into Tidal Bay. And so we're looking for a little bit more ripeness than we would for sparkling wine, but really not very much. And as a result, we end up with base wines that, when we blend them, we're able to achieve that really sort of citrusy, zippy, high acid style. Our residual sugars, I would say, probably have tended on the low side of Tidal Bays, low, maybe middle. That's usually below 10 and with higher acid, or around 10 with higher acid. So that's the style we like to make. And we've done it pretty consistently for however many vintages this is, 10, 9, 10, a bunch anyway. And then the New York Muscat is really just that rounding, complexity adding variety. Like this year, I just looked up our numbers. So for those of you who are asking, Lila, Craig, we're 54% Lacadie Blanc, 42.5 Céval, and 3.5 New York Muscat. And that is legitimately the most New York Muscat we've put in a Tidal Bay in at least 5 or 6 years. Like, we really use very, very little of it. But that's what we're going for. We're trying to put together a wine with a particular profile that's the profile that we feel represents Blomidon, and its consistency speaks to that. It's what we like to drink.
Simon, sorry, can I ask Simon a question? Did you say you stick with those 3 varieties, or have you ever had other varieties in there?
No, nothing.
No, just those 3. Nice.
Yeah. We have other varieties. We just don't use them in Tidal Bay. So
yeah, sorry, I meant.
Yeah.
We have another question for Amber and John. So, as this is your second vintage, did you do any major blending changes between the 2019 and the 2020, or did you basically just follow the same path?
We're going to stick with the Chardonnay again. It was the same the first year, Chardonnay and the Lacadie in the same figures, and the Chardonnay this year was so beautifully ripe. It went straight to the barrels, and then we stuck our nose in the coats of the Weißenheim, and we just got such beautiful aroma, and it's still in the glass here today. And so it was a nice change, and we'll save the Chardonnay for a few years down the road.
The Wine Scribbler, well, there's a great handle, is asking that I guess this is an open question for everybody. On the Wine Growers Nova Scotia mentions that Tidal Bay is a kind of a one-of-a-kind wine appellation in North America. He's asking if anyone could expand on that.
Anyone?
Oh, I'll start. It's the number one reason that we have a winery open today. I just love my peers telling me, John and Amber, well done. It's so good, and it's the wine that brings everyone to our door right now.
But I suppose, in the sense of the it's a one of a kind. In that, certainly the fact that it covers an entire province, much larger area than you would find in California or elsewhere, rather than regionality. But any thoughts on what makes the appellation of Tidal Bay, say, different from that of Niagara or any of the U.S. Regions?
Just their weather, climate, their season.
I think what it is, it's the blending of varieties that really showcase the sort of the terroir of Nova Scotia. And again, it's these are varieties that are selected because in our climate, they do represent and showcase something that is unique to Nova Scotia. You know, Lacadie Blancs grown elsewhere don't really have the same aromatic complexity and profile, you know, acidity, whatever, that they do grown here, or Céval for that matter. I mean, there's quite a lot of Céval grown around the world, but it tends to ripen differently and so on and so forth. So when Tidal Bay was established, you know, I like, there's lots of reasons it was established, but at the same time it was, you know, we're an up and coming wine region. There's an enormous amount of potential here. There's a lot, or a few, I should say. There's not a lot. There's a few grape varieties that do really, really well in our climate. And, you know, we talk about it being a whole province and that's big, but Nova Scotia's not very big. And if you were to draw, you know, a circle around where the vast majority of the vineyards are that are producing the grapes that go into Tidal Bay, it's not a big circle. You know, when you compare it to many regions around the world, you know, comparatively, it's just that we think of it as big, and, you know, the Gaspereau Valley is minuscule, right? But, you know, anyway, long story short, so we think of it as being a big area, but it isn't really, because the grape growing area within Nova Scotia is not particularly big. But anyway, you know, on their own, some of these varieties, well, they can be really great and make excellent wines. It's that ability to blend these characterful varieties that allow us to sort of showcase the terroir of the province. And, you know, again, when you taste them all, they're not exactly the same, but there is a big similarity there. And, you know, I would liken it to something like Meritage blends, which you can do sort of that Bordeaux style blend or whatever, which is, I don't know, there's some weird legal stuff around that about where you can use it and how you pay to use it and so on and so forth. But, well, Nova Scotia and Tidal Bay, I'm pretty sure was the first. There are appellations like this popping up. There's a sparkling wine one in Vancouver Island called Charme de l'Île, which is new, which is a similar sort of idea. There's some in what we would consider emerging states in the US, you know, sort of your Illinois, Michigan type things like that. There's a lot of discussion about these. Anyway, I think it's just, you know, it was new for North America, but only because of the way that it had been in North America. It's not a new style for anyone else. It's kind of modeled after like Châteauneuf-du-Pape or whatever, where you're taking a blend of many different grape varieties to create wines that really showcase that particular terroir.
Yeah, and unlike places like Napa, where it's just, you can grow any grapes you want, virtually, and you just have to grow it in a certain area, we have a list of allowable grape varieties within a certain area and certain standards. So like Bordeaux, you know, they're only allowed, you know, a handful of grapes, and they have certain standards they have to follow, and they have to grow within that area. Yeah, we're an appellation, so we have those similar rules, and it makes us different. From just if you will, a demarcated area where you're allowed to grow grapes or allowed to use a name.
Yeah, that's a great point too, Gina. And I know we're supposed to be talking about varieties, but at the same time, we never talk about these. But there's a whole list, like there's a whole production regulation list, and you know, about grape yields, total acidities, sugars, like all this stuff. So from a technical side, there's quite a lot more to Tidal Bay than really we ever talk about or whatever. But like to produce a Tidal Bay is a lot more strict than just, you know, blend grapes that happen to be grown in Nova Scotia. There's quite a lot more to it than that maybe we could or should or don't, I don't know, do a better job communicating. But yeah, a lot of it's really kind of techno winemaking, boring stuff. But it is all there.
That isn't the sexy side of the wine.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah. So now you've all touched on it briefly, but I certainly don't want to go without maybe getting some anecdotes from each of you on the 2020 vintage, both for Tidal Bay and the vintage itself. As you mentioned, 2020 was quite a year for a number of reasons. But how did you find the 2020 vintage, and how do you find the 2020 Tidal Bay in comparison to those of you, even Amber and John, who have been made too? But how do you I guess rate the 2020 against some of the other vintages we've had?
Light years ahead of last year. Just in the whole cellar this year. We just can't wait for the Riesling, and the guys and I was single varietals. Our 2020 Tidal Bay versus our 2019 Tidal Bay, it's no comparison. It was just, we all have to say well done. Thanks for the year we had.
Yeah, I mean, we're new to this. I mean, not new to drinking wine, trust me on that, but to the, the blending, because it's as you just said, is blending all that? Is it all that sexy? Is, actually working in the field and cutting the grapes and, showing it love and all that stuff? Because, I mean, that's ultimately what we all do. I mean, before we started this, you guys were talking about, having kids around harvest season. Well, I mean, I take my vacation during harvest season because I'm needed here. So we're new. So having our second Tidal Bay, it's exciting because we know a little bit more. I mean, we've been tasting Tidal Bay and have gone to all the events for years, and everybody does such an amazing job. So there is some sense of acceptance, and you have to stay on top of your game because Tidal Bay is ours. It's Nova Scotian. It's something that you want to represent well. And, everybody set the bar pretty high. So there is tinkering. We're only going to put the best in it, no matter what. That's why ours is a little different this year from last year. Last year's was still good. I drank plenty of it, but it's good too.
Gina?
I mean, definitely the difference between the two Tidal Bays and the two, and the wines from last year and this year, they're definitely a reflection of the vintage, of the growing season, of the warmth we saw. I found 19 was a test of patience. Hold off, don't pick yet. Let's let those acids come down. Let's let those flavors develop. Hold off. And this year, it was watching to make sure, from our perspective, that the acid in some cases didn't get too low, and that we were hitting the grapes at the right, the right balance between the acidity, the minerality, and the aromatic. So, completely different vintages. There's not like, the 19 was linear and higher in acidity, and those are the two words that come to mind. And the 2020 is richer, rounder, more aromatic in all aspects. I find, just tasting any of the wines compared to last year, not just Tidal Bay, I see that general difference. And that's what's exciting about making wine every year, because no two vintages are the same, and you always have to have your, as I always say, your tool belt ready to go whichever direction. Maybe it's going to be a leaner year, maybe it's going to be an aromatic year, maybe it's going to be rainy and we got to pivot, to use the popular word of this year. But it's exciting.
I hate pivot too. I know. Simon?
Yeah, so like Gina said, you couldn't have two different vintages, right? I think this year, or in 2020, we picked a full month earlier than we'd started in 2019. And this is following up the 2018 frost vintage, which was, I don't know if we can swear on this or whatever, but it was shit, it was terrible. So it's been really peculiar. It's been a sequence of three really peculiar vintages. So 2020, I think, was drier, warmer, and it was exacerbated by the fact that yields were down. At least for us, I don't know if that was across the board. So I would say an atypical Tidal Bay vintage. 2019, so late, so late. Another atypical Tidal Bay vintage. So like the reality is that, Tidal Bay should probably fall somewhere in between. But that said, I quite like the 19s because I really like that crisp high acid style. And I like the 2020s. They're a little bit richer, like I was mentioning when I was describing the wine. Aromatically, we're in a slightly different place than we typically are, which I think is interesting. It's good. I like that lime kick and whatever, which is nice. But, you mentioned the vintage overall. I think there's going to be some amazing wines from 2020. Any of the vinifera whites are going to be fantastic. Basically any reds should be fantastic. And I'm really excited, especially about the vintage sparkling wines. I think they're going to be really, really good. Overall, it was a great year. Again, yields could have been better, but it was a very, very good growing year. A little bit rushed to start when we started, but I think those three categories are going to be real standouts that we're going to be talking about for a long time.
Well, here's a few interesting questions. And I don't know the answer to this one, so we're going to ask you, of course. Has Tidal Bay been put into any international competitions, and if so, how have they fared? Any? I'm just trying to think if I've ever
international.
Yeah, certainly within.
Probably, but
Finger Lakes, Simon.
Yeah, Finger Lakes and maybe others. But just maybe not on an international thing, but something to point out is that the National Wine Awards of Canada, which is, I would say probably the leading wine competition in the country, has a Tidal Bay category, which is really cool. And they judged them together or whatever. So I don't know when they started that, a few years ago. They were out here judging one year. And they put it in their own category. So they've been big supporters of Tidal Bay, and they're across the country. The sommelier community and the wine community and whatever more and more of the consumer community is appreciating what we're doing out here. And they're crisp, interesting wines that definitely have a very maritime influence. And I think there's and I hope there's a lot of potential for them as one of the great things that we do anyway.
Here's an interesting one, Simon. I guess to your comments, does better wine mean higher prices in the end?
Lower yields, Mike. No, I'm just kidding. I don't. We'll see. Whatever. I don't think we'll change any of the core wine prices based on that. But if you're looking at the very, very high end of the market, like those premium sparkling wines that we're gonna sit on for years and years and years, like 2020 was an exceptional vintage for those, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the 2020 base makes it into I'm speaking from Blomidon's perspective here, like one of our Blomidon blends in the future, relatively high price points, but not so high compared to Champagne.
Just regarding everyone's, as you're talking and doing your tastings, Christian Bell asks, what's the difference between aroma and aromatics?
Aromatics. Simon, do you want to take that? I mean, the aroma is the actual.
I think you nailed it, semantics. So when I talk about the aroma of wines, you can't smell things individually, although we don't want to get too into smell physiology. But when I use the term aromatics, I'm talking about sort of like the different the different profiles or whatever, and like how they change, whether it's floral or whatever. But yeah, it probably is just semantics. I think in the wine world we all use these terms maybe slightly differently.
Well, believe it or not, we've gone past 7:00. It's been fantastic. I know the team here, everyone watching that's been with us for the time. I think they'd love if they were willing now to click on your cameras, so maybe we could get a nice shot to remember everyone by. If you'd like to do that the next few few seconds, that'd be great. If like to see your faces, I think our team might like to get a screenshot that we can use to celebrate the time we've had together. Don't know if it's
I'll
working.
answer something that popped up in the DM thing there too, and I'm getting a haircut tomorrow, Craig. If that's it's been a rough go here in Nova Scotia, so
I'm due up.
yeah.
So before we leave, again, an opportunity for anyone who, if they do have any more questions, to drop them in the message box. We can answer all of them. If you have anything you'd like to ask the folks we've had here today. If not, on behalf of Wine Growers in Nova Scotia, I'd certainly like to thank them for asking me to participate in this. A lot of fun. Great to see some familiar faces, and finally, Amber, get to see you and John, just not over the phone or by email. So our guests tonight have been Simon Rayfuse from Blomidon Estate Vineyards, John Eichenblum and Amber from Church Street, and of course Gina Haverstock from Gaspereau Vineyards. Again, thank all of you for joining us and being our guests, and certainly thank everybody for joining in. Again, next week, in the next 3 weeks, again at 6 to 7 on Friday, there'll be more some more interesting topics, kind of dissecting Tidal Bay in different forms. Today was grapes. There'll be lots of other interesting conversations coming up in the next few weeks. So again, thank you all. Tell your friends, and please tune in.